Welcome to the magical journey beyond mediocrity, where the mystical and the practical become aligned. You're listening to Meant for More, the Seeker's Guide to Success, with your host, Seeker's Guide and coach, Kristen Lloyd. Kristen guides you through mindset shifts to increase your consciousness and live your best life. So let's leave mediocrity behind and step into your magical, magnificent life with Kristen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Meant for More, the Seeker's Guide to Success. I am your host, Kristen Lloyd, and I am so excited to bring on a very special guest with me today, Megan Hale. Megan Hale is a retired psychotherapist, enoughness coach, and fierce feminine leadership mentor for women entrepreneurs who are ready to break free from their stories of not enough and to become the leaders of their dreams, their dreams are asking them to be. She's the creator of the fierce feminine leadership model that teaches women how to embrace their feminine, nourish their masculine, and lead from the center. She's also the podcast host of the Enoughness Revolution, a global conversation on the inner work that gets outer results and encourages women to rise. Welcome, Megan.
Kristen, thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad that you're here. I know that when I started this, I thought of you immediately because your message is huge. It's so impactful and so important for not only women entrepreneurs, but all women.
Yes, totally true. Mm-hmm.
And I have some questions for you because I think that the topic of enoughness is something that is very relative to women. And being that today is International Women's Day, which I didn't realize until this morning. Yay, let's celebrate.
Yes.
I think that this conversation of enoughness comes at a very divine time. And so I would love for you to share with the listeners today, what is enoughness and why is it a necessary component of success? And also, how is enoughness important for women? Why is enoughness important specifically for women to embrace? How is it impacting women?
Sure. So for me, enoughness is the foundation for everything. It's really embracing all of who we are. So it's cultivating this deep sense of authenticity, but also this self-acceptance that we're no longer striving to play by other people's rules, but really defining our own. And this is what really allows us to create fulfillment in our lives. So it's very common for us to attain success given somebody else's blueprint. But a lot of us will end up checking a lot of things off of this list. And then we get to this end destination. And we're like, why doesn't this feel better? Because you're not taking into account your own uniqueness of what needs to be coming through you on a soul level to really create that meaning and fulfillment in your life. So enoughness is a very inner journey of teasing apart all of the stories that we have been carrying for decades upon decades of who we think we need to be and what we think we're supposed to do in order to be enough. So when we start getting into these stories, we've noticed that, or I've noticed at least, that a lot of these stories are made up from a very long time ago, just based on the information that we got when we were children of how we needed to respond to the world in order to get our needs met, in order to be enough. And what happens is as we get into adulthood, the playing field has changed a whole lot, but yet we're still living by the old rules. So for me and my work with my clients, it's all about finding freedom and breaking free from all of these rules that are keeping you kind of boxed in so you can really kind of express who you are fully. And the reason I think this is such an important piece to success is because if you don't have your own definition of enoughness, you're always going to be chasing somebody else's bar. And there is never an end destination to that whatsoever. So when we start living by our own rules, we have this sense that we have finally arrived. And we continue to expand, but the journey there is a lot more gratifying.
Yeah, That's so powerful. And actually, that reminds me of something that I saw yesterday morning on Good Morning America. There was a woman who wrote an article on Huffington Post about how she was single at the time. I think now she's engaged. How for many women, the bar has been set at getting married, right? So people look down upon people who are not married or who are single, like, oh, you're not married yet. You're still single. And this article was written about how, you don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have a certain level of intelligence to get married. You just have to find a willing partner. And I'm bringing this into the enoughness conversation because that's a bar that's sometimes set for little girls. Like we have, the Disney movies and the fairy princesses and all of these bars that are set for women. And that's probably some bar that's set for, these little girls' enoughness. So when they grow up, how do they recognize what is their translation of, okay, I'm enough being single. Okay, I'm enough with this partner or not with this partner, or I'm enough with this degree or with this, or just by myself without this stuff. Like, I don't need this stuff. I'm enough right now as is. And that's, I think, an important conversation to cultivate, one that you are getting women to engage in.
Yeah, and I think that's why, women's leadership is so important to me, because it's really about letting go of all of these things that we have been cultured to think as women, and really go out on our own and define what's good for us. Because, you're totally right. We have, a macro culture that is our overall social influence of, Disney movies and commercials of, what we're supposed to check off on this list, whether that's, go to school, get a good job, get married, have kids, all of these things. And so a lot of us, we go and do all of these things thinking that this is some magic equation that if we do it, then we're going to be enough. And enoughness really means I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be fulfilled. And a lot of my clients, and I think a lot of women in general, find that the equation is not exactly that. There is another layer to it, which usually taps into purpose and meaning and why am I here? And am I living true to myself? That's most important. But totally right. The way the culture kind of feeds these messages to us is a very strong influence, no doubt, on how we view enoughness as women.
So tell me a little bit about the fierce feminine leadership model that you've created, and what is the fierce feminine leadership?
Yes, I love this question. So fierce feminine leadership really arose from my own work with enoughness, of noticing that I had taken on a lot of the male-driven culture to hustle and to succeed and to get to the top. And it was very ambition driven, and it was work, 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 and go, go, go. And what I noticed is that I wasn't really embracing my own feminine gifts, those of leaning into my own wisdom, of tapping into my intuition, of learning to work from a place of ease and flow versus all hustle, muscle, and force. So the fierce feminine leadership model really is not about doing things all the way in a feminine way. It's about embracing your masculine and feminine energies, because both are important. And this isn't just for women. Men also need to incorporate the masculine and feminine energies in their life, because that's where you see men being able to be more vulnerable in their relationships and more emotional, and we're emotional beings, right? So you have to create space for all of this. So the fierce feminine leadership model is really about embracing all of who we are as women, all of our different types of power. And it's built on 6 core components. And the first one is divine self-care, of really taking care of yourself and honoring yourself first. In our culture, we glorify busy and productivity and how much we can get done. And what often happens is that we're no longer making time to take care of ourselves. And so we're always leading and living and loving and working from a half-empty cup. And we're so much more impactful when our cup is full. So that's why self-care is an important piece of the model. We also have an empowered mindset, which to me really talks about the enoughness piece of realizing that your inner critic is not your truth. So creating an empowering self-dialogue is huge in creating success and fulfillment in your life. We also talk about spiritual foundations, really knowing your belief system and leaning on that to create trust and faith in the way that you're living your life. This is what allows us to work from a place of ease and grace instead of hustle and muscle, because a lot of that is based on fear.
Right.
We also talk about boundaries. Boundaries are a huge topic right now on how we just honor ourselves of what's okay and what's not okay. Not only setting boundaries with other people, but setting boundaries around our work, for instance. So we're creating more balance in our lives, whatever that looks like for us. We also talk about taking inspired action. And that's when we're really talking about, taking bold, courageous action that is in line with our values and in line with our purpose. And when we are taking aligned action, it's almost like the actions that we take are magnified because they are so aligned with our soul. It acts like a gravity that pulls the right things to us so we don't have to work as hard. And the last component is to simply work from a place of ease, grace, and flow versus all hustle, muscle, and force. That's not to say that you're not going to have to hustle a little bit. But what I've noticed is from the Fierce Feminine Leadership model, it's more ease with a side of hustle instead of all hustle with very little ease.
Right. Well, that brings me to the next very interesting question, which is, since we're driven so much by this masculine energy and this hustle, muscle, and force, because that's how we're raised. That's what we're taught, right? So all of these quotes from a lot of these self-development gurus say, if it's meant to be, or if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And, if you're going to be success, you've got to get up and get it done. And so all of these quotes reinforce doing, which is very masculine, versus being, which is very feminine. Yes. So what keeps us in the hustle, muscle, and force versus leaning into the ease, grace, and flow? And for the women listening, how may they ease into the flow versus continue on that path of force and hustle and muscle and bustle and all that?
Sure. So a lot of the hustle, muscle, and force comes from our need to control. And our need to control comes from a fear that if we don't do everything, in our power, that things aren't going to come to fruition. So a lot of the tools that I build with my clients is learning how to build trust and faith in something bigger than you. That it's not just what you're bringing to the table, but also what the universe is bringing to the table. And both parties are going to create this inspired idea that you've had. You're going to do your part, and the universe is going to do their part. And when you realize that you have something bigger working in your life, you realize that all you have to do is your part, what's in your control to do, and the rest is going to take care of itself. And so when you do that, you're not running around like a crazy person, like trying to be everywhere at once and do all of these things. You're very intentional with where you put your energy. You show up fully when you do show up with your whole heart and your whole soul. And when we do this, this has such a bigger impact because it's infused. It's very much infused with your purpose. And people get that. It resonates with people. So learning to work from this place is very uncomfortable in the beginning because we're going to have this desire or this fear that if I'm not showing up this many times a day or however many times I'm supposed to, then this is all going to fail. When you're working from a place of ease, grace, and flow, and especially trust and faith, you trust that every single time you put something out, it's reaching the right people. You trust that when you're showing up fully, it's resonating on a much higher level, much higher frequency. And what this does is this creates a much different energetic container for you to work from. And so instead of being like freaked out and worried of like, oh my God, I'm not getting out there enough, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so reaching the right people at the right time. And it does. But you have to give it the opportunity to work that way.
And what's so interesting about that is that it goes back to what you talked about earlier in terms of trusting. So the spiritual component of trusting that you're putting yourself out there enough, even if you think it's not enough, right? So stepping back from that hustle, bustle, and flow and trusting that the message is being heard by the right people and the right people will find you.
Yeah, definitely. And trust is hard for a lot of us because it means relinquishing control.
Right.
And a lot of us are not used to that.
Right. Which, control, there's so many, well, I'm going to step back. So one of the things that I heard in there is also about putting yourself out there fully. And so from what I know of both of our loves of Brene Brown, Brene Brown's work, vulnerability is a huge aspect. And you didn't mention vulnerability, but I heard and I felt vulnerability because I think that for someone to show up fully, for someone to show up as they are and in their enoughness, vulnerability is a part of that. Sure. And fear is something that tends to hold people back because when you're vulnerable, you open yourself up to criticism and judgment. And so when someone claims their enoughness, it seems like they claim their enoughness despite being vulnerable, despite being whatever outside sources may think or say. It's like a form of confidence almost within themselves. And so is not being able to be vulnerable one of the patterns that prevent individuals and women from claiming their enoughness, and what other patterns might prevent women or individuals from claiming their enoughness?
I think vulnerability is a huge piece of this. I mean, the whole journey of claiming your enoughness is a vulnerable one. I was mentioning this to another person a couple of weeks ago, and, enoughness is really getting in touch with your insecurities. And it's almost like walking into a room and sitting around in a circle is each one of your insecurities. And most of us, when we see that room, we're like, I'm not going in there. We shut the door, we walk away. Like, I know what's in there. I don't want to talk to any of that.
Yeah.
But the process of claiming your enoughness is actually going in and facing each one of those insecurities. And that is incredibly vulnerable because we're going to feel the feelings associated with those insecurities. We're going to relive some of the experiences associated with those insecurities. And a lot of us are never taught how to feel our feelings in the first place. And as women especially, there's this layer of shame about being vulnerable, that it's somehow weak. And as women, there's been this whole women's movement of being strong. And I think that's somewhat gotten twisted of being unemotional, which is not a healthy thing for us because we're emotional people. We're emotional beings, have a very human experience. And so the process of enoughness is actually going and sitting and talking to this insecurity and healing it and understanding what wisdom it has to give you, because there's always wisdom to be gained in every single insecurity that we face. So when you have this process like this, you understand how to embrace your vulnerability. You understand how to talk to it. And so when it revisits you as you're going through, an up level in your business or an up level in your relationship, up level in your life, whatever that might be, when that voice comes up to visit you, you know how to have a conversation with it instead of just shutting the door. And so you have an opportunity to do some further healing work, which only creates this ground for more compassion and more love, which is a much stronger place to work from when you're trying to show up fully than trying to scalpel off pieces of yourself and saying, well, you're not good enough, so you can't come to the table. When we allow our room for all of us to be present, this is what creates a lot of power because nothing is holding us back. Nothing is shaming us. We've taken our power back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole idea, going back to what society has triggered for us, all of these social norms and what's been expected since childhood, it comes back to, okay, well, I'm expected to do this. I'm expected to do this. I'm expected to do this. These are my roles, right? So women's roles, men's roles, and those are even changing. But what's so interesting is that all of these roles that define us are so separate from well, not separate from enoughness, but the components of enoughness sometimes are not aligned with those social, quote unquote, socially acceptable roles. And so for each individual, redefining and claiming one's enoughness may also be, delving into those vulnerabilities, like you said, talking to those insecurities one by one, because it's a presentation of what that definition is to each individual person.
Yeah, and I think also too, a lot of when we claim our enoughness, when we redefine this for ourselves, it's going to go against a lot of the things that we're taught. And I see this a lot just in entrepreneurship because there's a lot of messages out there of like, you need to be doing A, B, C, D, and E in order to be successful. And sometimes A, B, C, D, and E, it doesn't suit your soul. And in order for you to be enough, like you always have to be listening to what your soul is wanting and how your soul is wanting to be expressed, and trust that your soul knows what it's doing. And if you are to listen to it and follow it and let it guide your life, that you're going to reach your own level of success in a much easier way that's not going to feel so forced. And it's not going to feel like a struggle. And I think that's why a lot of women come to me, is because they're tired of this journey of success feeling like a struggle. And the reason it feels so hard is because they're not doing it in a way that feels good to them. So what that basically is saying to me is that you're following somebody else's rules because you think that's what's going to equal enough success.
Right.
When you redefine that for yourself, of say, I'm going to do it this way, and that might mean not being as consistent as other people or not posting on certain platforms as other people, you're going to feel this pull of like, oh my gosh, is this okay? Is this okay? This isn't what I'm told to do. But the more you lean into your soul and listen to that truth, the more it's going to carry you in a place that feels good. And when you feel good, this is what attracts more success and abundance into your life anyway.
Right. I love that. The feel good, because it's so true. And when you feel good, you do more of what feels good. So how do we create more alignment in our lives and our businesses?
So alignment is all based on authenticity. If you don't have authenticity, then you're not going to have alignment. And the way you get to authenticity is you have to tease apart all of the stories of who you think you need to be and what you think you're supposed to do in order to be enough.
That might take a while.
It's a journey. Right. But what I've noticed is that when we really get into the stories, it doesn't really take that long to unravel as we think. But we're going to continue to unravel our whole lives because these layers are just, it's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. But what I've noticed is that when we really dig into the work, within a couple of months, we really get a better grip on how we define enoughness. We realize our main stories that keep us in our not enoughness, which are some of the patterns that I want to talk about with you in a couple of minutes. And we start to have a different self-dialogue that allows us to progress forward. And so when an old story comes up, we know how to question it. And instead of just taking it as truth of I have to do it this way, or I need to do this way, or I should do this way, we know the warning signs of a story. We say, whoa, is this how I want to be living my life? And we give ourselves the opportunity to rewrite it right then. So yeah, it might seem a little daunting at first, but you'd be surprised at how much ground you can cover in just a couple of months.
Right. And it's transformative.
Oh my gosh, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely think that breaking down the old narrative and rewriting the stories, that's one of those lines that I really do love, which is, the story's not over yet. You have the ability to rewrite it. And I think that breaking down, that's kind of like a metaphor for what you're doing, is to break down these old stories of, oh, I can't, or I'm not, your word, the enoughness, I'm not good enough yet, or I don't have this yet, or I'm not here yet. And the picture that I got in my mind when you were just speaking is someone who's climbing up a hill, with a heavy backpack, and just it's daunting labor, versus someone who's just coasting along with ease and flow. So two totally different pictures, but definitely I think that the standard or the dialogue that we've created in society is that to get anywhere, you have to climb the hill. Because if you don't climb the hill, if it's not hard, then you don't deserve it, right? So these are some tangled words. So when you're claiming enoughness, right, that's something that is a story that can be told within one's mind is, oh, this is so easy. Do I even deserve this?
Yeah, no, that's a great story. And a lot of women have that story. A lot of us have that story of, I need to work hard in order to be successful. That's what we've been told, right? For most of us, like we have to work hard in order to be successful. What if you don't have to work hard? What if success can be easy? Yeah. It's a completely different story that dramatically shifts the way that you work.
But then someone has to believe that story. Someone has to, we have to buy into that story.
Right.
And rewrite or unwrite or let go of the old story, which is, okay, so if it doesn't take a lot of work, if it isn't hard, then, how does someone step into that? Because it's such a huge contrast from what we've been taught for many years. Like you say, these layers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I get the question a lot, like, well, is it just a choice and you just flip a switch and all of a sudden you believe this new story? And no, it's not that, because in order for a new story to be true, you have to create space for it to be true. And the only way you create space is by healing the old story in the first place, of noticing where that story came from, if that story feels good for you, and noticing the evidence of when that story was not true. So like the working hard story, for instance. When did you have success and it was just easy? We've all had those moments of like, oh my gosh, it just kind of fell into my lap. Yeah. So success can happen in a different way, right?
Right.
And so we kind of have to we have to build up to the new story being our new normal and our new truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you told me a couple minutes ago that you were going to talk about some of the patterns that prevent us from enoughness. And I know we've already talked about a couple, but are there any that specifically stand out to you that you think are either triggers or that are the biggies, like the big kahuna?
Yes. So we live in a very perfection-driven culture. Everything that we are fed is photoshopped or morphed in some way to present this ideal. And so what happens for many of us is that we think things have to be perfect in order to be enough. Yes. Whether that's us as a person, whether that's our life, whether that's our partner, our relationship, our kids, whatever that is.
Right.
And perfect doesn't exist. So one of the biggest things about perfection is that if you're using that as a measure for things to be enough, that's never going to happen. So you have to, like, part of enoughness is learning to deal with imperfections, learning to embrace imperfections, and learning that things can still be enough in spite of them. That's a very huge component. The other thing that I see is comparison. And, I haven't done enough research between men and women, but I would imagine that women fall into comparison a little bit more frequently than men, just because of the way our culture is set up. That women are kind of taught to compare themselves for the available resources that are out there. Comparison is the quickest way to fall out of enoughness. The quickest way. And so when you find yourself comparing yourself to someone else, you have to put the hammer down and step away from that pattern, because there will never be enoughness when you're comparing yourself to what someone else is doing, how somebody else looks, what someone else is creating, how much somebody else is making, because there's always going to be somebody that's doing it better than you. Always. That's just how it is. So we cannot let our enoughness be dictated on being the best at everything. It kind of falls back into the whole perfection thing, because we'll never get there. The other thing that I see a lot of times with women is this whole pattern of having to please others. and make everybody else happy. And that's how we find a lot of our worthiness. So if people are not happy around us, then we start taking on this extra responsibility or this extra pressure that we need to be doing more. We're not doing enough for them and all of this. When in fact, it's not our responsibility to make other people happy. We can create an environment for other people to be happy. We can do that. But it's everyone else's responsibility to find their own joy and to cultivate their own happiness. And that goes a lot into kind of emotional boundaries that I think are incredibly important just for our overall well-being, but definitely for your enoughness too. Like, you can still be enough when somebody's mad at you. As long as you showed up fully and you showed up with your whole heart, conflicts are going to happen. If we're trying to please others or win everyone's approval, that's never going to happen. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like you. That's just the reality, right? Mm-hmm. And another thing that I see quite often is we get into this pattern of like having to prove our worth, like proving that we deserve to belong, proving that we deserve to charge a certain amount for our services, for instance. Anytime we're proving, we're hustling. We're hustling for our worth. And you're basically sending this subconscious message that you're not enough as you are, if you're hustling and you're proving like that. So we all deserve love and belonging simply for being alive. We all deserve to charge fair value for our work because we have put in enough of our soul into it. I think when you're really living your purpose and living authentically, that is something that is incredibly valuable. It doesn't matter how much experience or education you have. If you're serving your soul purpose, that deserves to be rewarded at a fair rate that supports your livelihood, that supports your family, and that feels good. So I don't think we have to prove, we don't have to prove anything. We're all worthy of the things that we desire. Mm-hmm. And I would say lastly, the thing that I kind of see that puts people in a place of not enoughness is that they put things off and they postpone the inner work that's necessary. They try a lot of different things to kind of put a Band-Aid on things instead of getting to the root issue. Yeah. And so I think that comes back to just a lot of fear of not knowing what to expect, not knowing if they can heal it, not knowing what they're going to find if they go in. But that's where all of our best gifts are. Right. So the patterns that show up the most are perfecting and pleasing and proving and getting caught up in productivity. A lot of times us as women, we measure how good we are by how much we are able to get done. And that usually leads to burnout and fatigue. So learning to define your enoughness by who you are instead of what you do is a huge turning point for many women.
When you first started talking, the first thing that popped into my head was beauty pageants. Yeah. Because that's something that we're, comparing, right? Who does it? Who's the prettiest? Who does it better? Who has the better voice? Because it's all a competition. Yeah. And there is that comparison versus, wow, you have a really awesome voice. Wow, you really can play a musical instrument. Amazing. Wow, you're the fastest runner. Wow, you really have beautiful eyes. Wow, you really have beautiful hair. Everybody has a something, right, that they bring to the table, something special, something unique, whether it's the personality or whether it's, their gifts, what they can do. And that's what I hear what you're saying is that we all have something that is of value to share. And that's our soul's work, right? Whatever that is. And not that our soul's work is looking pretty, but I digress. But there are people that are judged based on how they look. And, beauty pageants, that's a huge thing, I think, in our culture, that pegs women against women because there is this competitive nature, this competitive edge versus collaboration, right? Versus, which which I talk about in my work, collaboration, and you talk about in your work, collaboration over competition and working together. There's enough for everybody. And you just show up fully, authentically, and access it versus, pulling other people's hair out to climb to the top, because your top is different from their top. But the idea that there's only one top, I think is what our new generation is trying to establish, is that there is enough and we are enough.
Sure. I mean, well, think about just how many women who have this craving for more. They know that they're meant to do more in their lives. They're meant to serve more. They're meant to do something of impact and something of meaning. And they start looking around and they see other women already doing what they want to do. And if they are in a pattern of comparison, it's quite easy for them to say, oh, they're already doing what I want to do. She's so much better at it than me. She's so much further along at it than me. Like, what's the point of even starting? Like, this kind of thought will prevent more people from going after their dreams than anything else. Because there's this idea that, like, there's not enough room for all of us, when there's so much room. The world needs every single person who is feeling called to serve their purpose in the world to stand up and rise and go and do it. The world needs that.
Yeah,
so
but
there's never a lack.
If I said, hey, I want to be a heart surgeon, and you are already a heart surgeon.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so much different in entrepreneurship. If you're a heart surgeon and I'm like, oh man, Megan's a heart surgeon, I can't be a heart surgeon. Like, nobody says that in the medical community. No one says, oh no, Megan's an accountant, I can't be an accountant. She's already doing tax accounting, Who says that?
No, you're totally right. Totally right. But I think what really kind of feeds into that is, so there's this quote by Brene Brown that I've really just been crushing on lately. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but it goes something like, the most damaging stories we tell are the narratives that make us question our lovability, our divinity, and our creativity. And I love it because it hits on three of like, you want to talk about not feeling enough. Wondering if people are going to like you. Wondering if you're worthy of the things that are in your heart. Wondering if you can actually create something that's going to have impact in the world. When we question these things, this is what keeps us stuck. And it keeps us from trying to put ourselves out there. And it will crush more dreams than anything else when we question like our worth in that way. Because like what's really underneath this when we're compared, like we see somebody doing what we want to do, is there's a story of not enough. I'm not as good as they are. And that, if that's what you allow to be your truth, that's the end of the road. Right. You're going to stay in doing what you've always done and never open yourself up to the possibility of all the fulfillment that is potentially waiting for you.
Right. Wow, that's so powerful. So you're doing this work in a very powerful way. Clearly, you had to do the inner work to get to where you are.
Oh, yeah.
What was your journey to enoughness?
I think I've been on a journey to enoughness my whole life, which I think we all are. We just don't necessarily realize it or call it that. We're all trying to find this blueprint, this map to happiness. And we try a lot of different things to get there. But I think what we end up finding is that we have to throw the map away altogether and learn to create our own. For me, when enoughness really started coming to light, I had just started a very successful coaching practice last year. And I started making great money right away. I was launching beautiful group programs. It was something that I thought I had always wanted. It was like this version of success that I had bought into of like, this is what success is, and this is what's going to feel good, but it didn't feel good. And I knew relatively early on, I would say, 3 months in, that I had been a chaser my whole life. And I love that this is called, the seeker part, because I confused seeker with chasing, and they are not the same thing.
No.
So I thought that I was seeking, but I was in fact chasing after things for, I mean, since I can remember, always being in high achievement and all of this. And I said, where's the end goal? I've finally arrived to this place where I thought that this was going to be the epitome of success. Why doesn't it feel more fulfilling? Mm-hmm. And I started to realize that I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself to define success on my own terms. I was really scared of stepping away from the pack and doing things my own way, of finding my own answers. Mm-hmm. I had never really been encouraged to do that, always looking outside of myself for the right answers and the right way, and just teach me and I can follow the path. So I ended up taking, 4 months off. I tell my clients, I started a successful business and then I quit a successful business because the alignment piece wasn't there. And that's where the enoughness work came in, when I really started digging into, what is it that I'm chasing after and why am I chasing after it? And what I came to realize is that I was chasing after this version of enoughness. And enoughness didn't live in the way that I was trying to, in the things that I was chasing after. There would never be an end in sight if I didn't change my definition, because there's always going to be more to do and more to get and more to attain and more to become. So I realized I couldn't define enoughness in that way. So what happened in those 4 months is that I did a lot of inner work, a lot of story work around who I thought I needed to be and what I thought I needed to do to be enough. And I realized that I was already enough. I always had been enough. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, there was no more trying to find this answer that was going to lead to my success. The answer was already there. My purpose, it was already there. I just never gave it the credit that it deserved. Mm-hmm. And I had been running from it for a very long time. But when I did the enoughness work, it cleared a way for me to start stepping into my purpose in a much different way. And it finally gave me the room to be whole. I was already whole. I wasn't chasing after anything to be whole. Right. And when you become whole, you come to a place that is much more grounded, right, where your purpose just starts to expand in a much more selfless way, because it's not about you anymore. You've already taken care of you. Now it's about serving your purpose on a bigger level so you can help other people do the same. And that's what I help my clients do now, is really find their truth, find their purpose, and become whole so they can go and serve their purpose fully in the world.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing. That's a beautiful story. And it's so interesting that you were brave enough, okay, I think that needs to be acknowledged, to quit a successful business, to do the inner work, to say, hey, this is not cutting the mustard. This is just not where I want to be or continue on this path. So that takes a lot of courage.
I was super scared. And I remember talking to my coach at the time, and I was like, what am I going to do? People are going to think all these things about me, and they're going to think I'm just a big fake and all of these things. And
vulnerability, ding, ding, ding.
Exactly. And the whole journey was so vulnerable. But I just remember having to make some really hard choices to truly honor what I was going through and give myself the space and time to do what I know I needed to do. And I'm just, I look back at that time and I'm so grateful for it, just so beyond grateful for it, because it gave me my soul back.
Yeah.
It really did. And I don't think that there's anything more powerful than that, because it was necessary in order for me to embody the woman that my dreams are calling me to be. And you're never going to be able to embody that person if there's stories of not enough, because you're not going to think that you deserve it. And that's what's been the most transformative for me, is knowing that I am so worthy of everything that is in my heart, of everything that my soul is here to do, that I'm extremely capable of doing it. And the universe is on my side. It's been a very spiritual process,
yeah,
to say, but it's just, it's a different level of power. That's all I can say. It's just, it comes from within, and it is just so grounding, and it's a beautiful platform to work from. It really, really is.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. That's a beautiful, I love how you put it, because it really is. It sounds very grounding. It sounds very whole. And I love I mean, the whole ease and flow,
Mhm.
the feminine energy that comes from that,
Oh,
which a lot of women don't embrace because, again, they get so caught up in the masculine of the hustle, bustle, and muscle. And
well, you know what's
that's,
interesting about it is that when you, and a lot, been doing a lot of reading and research about just, the feminine essence and feminine energy. And what's interesting that I've noticed is that when you embrace your feminine, it amplifies the masculine. Meaning that when you are really grounded in who you are as a woman, and you're no longer listening to what society is telling you need to be, and you're really just embracing all of your gifts of what it
right.
means to really be just a powerful woman. Because a power from a feminine sense is much different than a masculine sense.
Mhm.
Feminine power is soft, it's gentle, it's vulnerable, it's nurturing, and those behaviors, to treat yourself that way, is sometimes the most courageous thing that many of us will ever do. To treat ourselves with compassion, to give ourselves some grace, ease up on ourselves, because most women were so incredibly hard on ourselves. So when we come from a place that is very nurturing, like we become our own best friend, we become our own inner champion, the masculine has such a stronger foundation to work from that it's like the action you do take is so much bolder. Like you go and do things you never thought that you would ever do because the confidence is there, and I
Right.
tell my clients that this work is like, it takes it one level deeper below confidence. It's conviction. There is no doubt in your mind who you are, what you're here to do, and that you're extremely worthy of going and doing it in the world. That goes beyond confidence.
I love
It's
that.
a knowing. And when you have that knowing, like the action you take is just so much bigger than you ever could have thought possible. And that's what helps us up level and really step up and serve like on such a bigger level. And it's so gratifying. So
Right.
gratifying.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what society teaches, because um we think, based on the paradigms that the research that I've done, there's people seem to think that compassion makes you weak, or forgiveness, forgiveness work, compassion, that actually makes you stronger. Having
Oh,
the
yeah.
ability to forgive someone or having compassion for yourself, it's a strength
Mm-hmm.
and not a weakness.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you have compassion on your side, there's nothing that you can't do. There's nothing you can't do. And it's so much easier to take a big giant leap when you feel supported than versus when you're tearing yourself down. It's almost like you're coming from a place of love versus fear.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it breaks down to. So if you are, beating up on yourself, you're going to take an action out of fear that you're not good enough. Versus if you're like compassionate towards yourself and you're really being nurturing, you're taking that step because you know you're worthy. Those have two very different energies attached to them that are going to have very different results.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you said earlier that you defined yourself as a seeker, but realized you were really a chaser.
Yeah.
What do you think defines you as a seeker now? Or at what point did you realize, you already shared when you realized, okay, there's more beyond this. But at what point did you say, okay, this defines me as a seeker, or I'm seeking more than just what is?
I think I've always been a soulful person. I've always been a very spiritual person. And I think that a part of me has always been seeking more enlightenment in a way, of more fulfillment, of more truth, of more light, of more purpose and meaning. But I think that I chased a lot of things in order to get there versus seeking the answers within me. So what has dramatically changed on my end is that the way that I seek my answers now are very much internal, trusting that I have the answers and access to the wisdom that I need to have the answers that I'm seeking. So that's probably been the biggest shift, just from my own personal work, is that instead of chasing after the how or the fix to the solution, I really seek my own guidance, and I seek my own support, and I seek my own intuition for where I need to go. And seeking to me is not, it's not meaning that you're lacking something. Mm-hmm. You're already complete. You're looking for that extra layer of where do I go from here? And right. how do I expand in a more purposeful way? And I think that's probably the biggest shift versus like chasing is very ego driven. Mm-hmm. It's me. Seeking to me is very other driven.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the collaborative. It's about the community. It's about outside yourself being a part of something bigger.
Yes.
That's one of the ways that I define it.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So in enoughness, if for the women listening or men listening, if there's one, just one, always difficult to pick one. If there's one overarching either theme or message regarding enoughness, claiming one's enoughness, what do you think that would be that you would share with us today?
That your inner critic is not your truth. There's this phrase that I used to use when I was practicing therapy, but I think it's still relevant today. Just because I think it and just because I feel it doesn't make it true. Amazing. Your inner critic is going to tell you all kinds of nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. And a lot of us don't have a good grip on our inner critic. Mm-hmm. Some of us don't even realize that there is an inner critic. We just think it's ourselves. And we're like, gosh, we're nasty to ourselves.
Right.
But your inner critic, that's only one part of you. And that's the part of you that needs healed. That's the part of you that's carrying all these stories of what it thinks you need to be and what it thinks you're supposed to do in order to be enough. That's not your truth. It's not your truth at all. So I would say first, know that that's not what's going on. It's only one perspective. Your soul is enough. It's always been enough. But in order for you to believe that and for it to be true, you're going to have to do the work of healing all of those stories that are preventing that truth to be your normal.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you working on now? What projects do you have in the works with Enoughness?
So I just launched a group program called the Fierce Feminine Sisterhood, where we really talk about rewriting the stories of not enough and working from the Fierce Feminine Leadership Model, which this program is just like my heart and soul. I'm so excited about it. It will be launching again next year. But in the meantime, I have a self-paced course coming out May 1st. It's called the Fierce Feminine Masterclass, where I've collaborated with 7 other amazing women coaches to really talk about how we work from this fierce feminine leadership model. Mm-hmm. And how we create success that feels good and success on our own terms, but how to create the level of success, like how to really up level in your life and business from a way that doesn't feel forced. So I'm really, really excited about that class. It'll be coming out May 1st. We'll have a group for that for the women who want to really dive in. You'll have access to all of us coaches, which is going to be phenomenal. And other than that, I'm going to be releasing a self-paced version of the Fierce Feminine Sisterhood for women who are ready to rewrite those stories of not enough and really do the inner work that gets the outer results so you can go and serve your purpose more boldly in the world. And that is going to be out later this year as well.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that you have, and I know I said it earlier, but you have a podcast, The Enoughness Revolution.
Yeah.
And is that ongoing weekly or monthly? How do your episodes unfold?
Sure. I have a new episode released every Monday and Thursday. Where I'm interviewing some top earners and some very successful women on the inner work that has gotten them the outer results. We really talk about them rewriting these stories of how they've found their authenticity, how they found their purpose, how they've tapped into their creativity and really gone after what they want. So they're really powerful conversations. And you can find that by going to megan-hale.com/enoughness revolution. It'll take you straight to the podcast on iTunes. And it's also on my website as well, which is megan-hale.com.
Amazing. Amazing. And then for women who are listening who may be interested, don't you also have a Facebook community for women entrepreneurs as well?
Yes. So the Bold, Beautiful Soul Tribe on Facebook is my little haven where I'm doing free enoughness coaching every single day and leadership mentoring, really how we create success from the Fierce Feminine Leadership Model and how we rewrite stories of not enough. So I'm always doing like free challenges, free workshops, webinars, have guest experts in there. We have a lot going on. It's a great community of women. So if you are vibing with the Fierce Feminine Leadership Model and this concept of enoughness, I would love to come and invite you to join me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I am so excited that you've been here. And I'm not sure that anybody, because I didn't mention this in my intro, but I was blessed and grateful enough to be one of your guests on the Enoughness Revolution.
Yes.
I honestly don't remember what episode it was, but
it was episode 15.
I'm episode 15. Woohoo! So for my listeners, when you check out, not if, but when you check out the Enoughness Revolution, and you'd like to know more about my story to enoughness, because that's what we talk about on the Enoughness Revolution, my episode is number 15. So
yes. That's
awesome. So I am so grateful that you took the time. I know you have a super busy schedule and are a mama to be and have this amazing business. I'm so excited for you for all the things that are happening in your life.
Thank you. Me too. I'm so glad I was able to come and join you. This is just an amazing program and I love what you're doing. So keep it up, girl.
Thank you. I will.
Yes.
And I'm so glad everybody, Megan, just tell everybody again where they can find you.
Sure. Megan-Hale.com is where you can find me most easily, or you can join me at the Bold, Beautiful Soul Tribe on Facebook.
And Twitter? Do you have a Twitter?
Yeah, it's Megan3Hale.
Awesome.
And that's the same on Instagram too. Although I'm more consistent with Facebook. That's kind of where I hang out the most.
Okay, good. That's good for everybody to know. So this closes another episode of Meant for More, The Seeker's Guide to Success. Today's special guest, Megan Hale. Thank you again for joining us. And everyone, if you, to continue this conversation, head on over to KristenLloyd.com and we will have the episode up there, and I will also be sharing this episode with Megan so that for those who couldn't listen live, will be able to listen. So continue seeking. You are meant for more. And for this special episode, I just want everybody to know you are already enough. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to Meant for More, the Seeker's Guide to Success. But the fun doesn't end here. Head over to KristenLloyd.com for your Seeker's Guide workbook filled with exercises to help you go from mediocre to magically magnificent.